So having not ever done this before with you guys, I understand that you essentially are looking for just a refresher on some things. You definitely have brought questions with you about the Q process. I also have some, things that I can show you of new products that are coming, new version of Aqua that hopefully will be released in the coming months, and things like that that I can share with you as well. But I know that we also have some specific topics that we want to make sure that we cover throughout this session as well. So if there's something that I don't cover that you're curious about, please be sure to speak up and let me know so that we can address that throughout today. So first of all, just as kind of helping me as a point of reference, raise your hand, I guess probably is the best way to do this. If you have attended a full EDQ class within, we'll say, the last 3 years. Okay. What was that? Online definitely counts. Yes, absolutely. Online counts. Okay. So then for those of you that don't have your hands up, that means that it's been more than 3 years since you attended the full EDQ class. Okay. Has it been more than 5 years? Okay. More than 10 years? Okay. Okay. And so the reason I asked that is because some things have changed with our quality assurance, right? Over the last 5 years, 10 years. Before that, I wasn't probably really involved. Well, yeah, I guess 15 years is about the mark for when I got involved with QA. But anyway, so yeah, that's why I always ask that question, because if you have not gone through a full EDQ class in the past, we'll say 5 years, especially, then things have changed, right? Which if you're still actively queuing, you're keeping your certification, you're using Aqua, you've probably just kind of morphed into those changes, right? Maybe you didn't have any formal training on the changes, but definitely you've been queuing in that way since those changes were implemented. But mainly the biggest change that was implemented was this kind of shift away from, we don't want to make the process of case review negative. And we always, always, always want to try to catch them doing it right. And we want to focus wherever we can on the ways that they are using the protocols and using the systems correctly, right? And so we had this whole shift towards what we call strengths-based feedback. Has everybody had an opportunity to kind of learn about strengths-based feedback, right? So when it comes to strengths-based feedback, there's essentially 2 different formulas. So let me go ahead and pull up the slides that I have for that, because that's going to be helpful for you to understand the formulas there. Get rid of that. Okay. So we're going to get into here. So the idea behind strengths-based feedback, again, is to use the things that the dispatchers have as their strengths and the things that they're doing correctly, and to kind of help them, focus on those strengths to do more of the things that we want them to do differently, right? So like I said, there's essentially 2 different formulas when it comes to strengths-based feedback. The first one is recognition. Let me find the part of the slides that I want here. There we go. Performance recognition. Okay. So let me move this over. So performance recognition is, let me go back one. Can you guys see my, all right. So these are examples. So here's the formula that we're talking about. Performance recognition means that what they did was excellent, and we want them to keep doing that and do more of it, right? And so the formula when it comes to that is the scenario plus the strength, plus the action, plus the outcome, and all of that together equals strengths-based feedback. And if you've never done any kind of comments or any kind of feedback in this format, at first it can be a little bit overwhelming. You can look at this formula and go, wow, that looks really intimidating. But when you break it down a little bit and kind of better understand what it is that we're talking about, especially when you practice this over and over again, it's a lot simpler than it looks, right? So the scenario, the reason that we have the scenario as a part of that formula is because when these dispatchers are getting the feedback from you, how are they receiving it? Is it by email? Do we print them out and hand them to them? How are they getting their feedback? You print them? Okay. And then just like put them in their mailbox?
Yeah.
Or do you ever have like face-to-face?
If need be.
Okay,
Have a
sure.
really good one.
Yeah.
They're not declining.
Sure. Then we have to have a face-to-face. Good, okay. But otherwise, for the ones in the middle, it goes in their mailbox and they'll read it themselves, okay? How about the rest of you guys? Similar or different? Guardian Tracker, excellent. Third party that kind of helps you track all of that feedback stuff, okay. The nice thing about Guardian Tracker, as I understand it, is that there's a way for them to also communicate back to you, right? So there's kind of that two-way, you know, I have a question about this, or I'd like to make a statement about that feedback that you gave me. Okay. Is everyone else in here using Guardian Tracking as well? Okay. But the thing to remember about that is that it's all in digital format, right? So we're not really printing anything out and handing it to anyone. Okay. So again, kind of going back to this formula, the reason that we have the scenario built in there is because if you think about it, some time could have passed from the time that they took this call and then now to the time they're receiving feedback. Hopefully it's as short as possible, but we know that, you know, giving them instant feedback right after they hang up the phone call is probably not going to happen in most situations, right? And so that scenario piece helps them to remember what this call is that they're getting feedback on, right? So it's as simple as that. It's the, you know, what is this call and what is the situation that we're talking about? The strength, of course, the reason that that's part of the formula is because that's to help them understand that, again, we want to recognize the things that they're doing correctly and their positive attributes, and we want them to, you know, hone in on those strengths and do more of it. Of course, then we have the action. What is it that they did that we really liked about this call? And then outcome. Outcome does not mean what happened to this person all the way when they got to the hospital and, you know, did they survive? That's not what we're talking about when it comes to outcome. We're talking about the outcome of just that tiny little interaction of that phone call. Okay. So here's some examples of that formula in play. So the first one that we have here is the caller was upset that his car was stolen. So this is actually a police example. I have some fire and medical ones next, but it's a good example of this formula being applied. Caller was upset that his car was stolen and was belligerent throughout the call. That's the scenario piece, right? We're reminding the call taker, what was this call that we're talking about? Used a great deal of patience. Notice we said you here, you. When they do something positive, we want to make sure that we attach it to them. We want to make the positive feedback personal. Anything that we need to improve, we don't want it to be personal. We don't say you did this wrong, but anything that they did that was positive, we absolutely want to make it personal. So we say you used a great deal of patience. That's the strength when dealing with him. Your tone of voice was calm and even, and you explained all of your actions. I love it. That even has the word action in it, so we know which part of the formula that contains. So that's the action that we want them to keep doing, right? That's all tied to customer service. And then here's the outcome we're talking about, a very professional interaction. Thank you, right? And I even love the fact that they attached the word thank you on the end of that, because that's really poignant. We don't hear thank you enough. And to hear it just even in a simple thing like a feedback on a call that was reviewed, sometimes that can really carry a lot of weight to it. So this is one of my favorite examples of strengths-based feedback. Okay. Here's another example. So this one is a medical example. The caller stated before the address that he found his mother unconscious and not breathing. That's your scenario. You were paying close attention. That's the strength. And selected the fast track from case entry question 3. That's the action, which allowed this call to be dispatched quickly. That's the outcome. So essentially, what did this call taker do? Can you tell based on the feedback? What did the call taker do on that call? Yep, both of those things. Active listening and fast track to the echo. They use that echo for obviously not breathing and unconscious in ProQA, which is something that maybe this agency was missing or struggling with. And so they wanted to recognize when somebody got it right. And so I love that this is the way that they chose to give that feedback. Now, we're not telling you that you have to give strengths-based feedback on every single thing that they do right or every single thing that they do wrong, because, oh my gosh, that would take up your whole day trying to come up with this. But this is something that is very powerful, especially if you have dispatchers at your agency that have maybe gotten a little bit complacent about the feedback process. Does anybody know what I'm talking about with that? Let's hear it. Talk to me about what that means. How are they accepting the feedback process from you guys right now?
Making improvements without
Sure.
continuous sit downs.
Okay. Yeah. So they are, but think about it, right? Human nature, nobody likes to have their work product scrutinized, right? And in no other job do we do, quality assurance the way that we do in this industry, right? We listen to everything that's recorded. We're looking at the things that they're clicking on the computers. And so when you think about that human nature, that's everybody's going to have a defensive mechanism that's going to come up, right? Everybody's going to have a tendency to get a little bit of that pushback when you're scrutinizing their work products, right? But are they reading your comments? That's always my first question, because that was something that for me as a Q, I found really frustrating. I would spend all this time doing these really good feedback, these formulas, and really applying, like trying to help them get better. And this was back when we used to print all of ours and hand them, put them in their mailbox. And I would watch them pull that out of their mailbox, look at the first page, flip to the last page, find out what their final compliance level was, and then chuck it in the trash. And it broke my heart every time because they're not getting the value out of it, which is all of my comments, right? Have you guys experienced that? Okay. So talk to me about what ways that you've tried to overcome it, or what ways what things can we do to help them not chuck it in the trash? Okay, face-to-face. Face-to-face feedback whenever possible is so important. And it shouldn't always just be when they've gotten something wrong. And certainly it shouldn't always be when they've gotten something really, really wrong. Now we know that when they've gotten something really, really wrong, we probably do need to pull them aside and have a face-to-face. And a lot of times we're also, playing the recording and just really trying to help them get better. But we should also randomly be doing face-to-face for the things that they get right, because then that helps to alleviate the negative connotation of our feedback. Because if you think about it, if they know that the only time they get pulled into the principal's office is if they did something wrong, they're going to automatically go into that room with that defense mechanism pulled up, right? With that chip on their shoulder going, oh man, I must have screwed this one up. I can't wait to hear what I did wrong. But
same time, we're running into situations where I know we're not the only ones at Oxford that are so short.
oh my gosh, yep.
That trying to get that individual time with each other, you may be reviewing something on somebody else's shift that may be a night shift or a day shift. opposite of what you are, so.
Yeah.
And we're already working so much overtime.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Try to come in and have those face-to-face conversations. I think at our center at least, we've kind of fallen back on that one, just because we're being pulled in so many different directions.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was actually going to be my next point, is that, look, I realize that what I'm saying here is a big ask, especially in a world where staffing is such a challenge. And anyone else dealing with that, like not able to get the FaceTime because of the staffing challenges at your agency? Okay. And yeah, I mean, you got to do the best that you can. You might not be able to meet face to face with the ones that you want to. So that's when it becomes important to prioritize. And what I'm saying though is that if you can, when you're prioritizing the ones that you can do face to face, make sure that some of the good ones also make that list, right? So that hopefully we're not just only pulling them into the office when it's something bad. Because like I said, by human nature, you're just, then that as soon as that person is told, I need to see you in my office for a minute, that guard goes up, and a lot of what you're saying might not get through because they're going to automatically know that they've done something wrong. So that's where, we certainly have this feedback that can help with recognizing things that are positive. Another thing that I did, and I can show you this in Aqua, is at my agency, when I found that they were, not looking, bless you, not looking at the comments and things like that, and we're just only looking at the second page to see what their overall compliance level was and then chucking it in the trash. We now have the ability in Aqua to turn that off so that they don't even see what their overall compliance level is on their feedback at all. Does anyone have that turned off at your agency so that they don't see it? Because then that allows them they have to focus then on the feedback, because they don't have the ability to see what their overall compliance is without reading the comments. Okay. In fact, do we even really need them to know what their overall compliance is? We know what it is. We're tracking that in the background. We know how, where they are and where we want them to be and what their goals are. What we really want them to focus on is the feedback, the comments that we're giving them. Is anybody using screenshots in Aqua in your feedback? One person? Okay. Does anybody not know how to do screenshots oh man, I'm so happy I'm here today. I can't wait to show you this. You're going to learn something new today. You can add screenshots of anything you want in your incident performance reports. Yeah. So remind me if I don't. I'm sure I'll get to it, but if I don't, remind me. I'll show you that in just a minute. All right, so here's your final example of performance recognition for feedback. And again, this is, we're recognizing that what they did was great and we want them to do more of it, okay? And this is a fire example. The caller was very upset, yelling that her stove was on fire. That's your scenario. You focused in on this quickly and had that structure fire dispatched and caller in danger instructions given at lightning speed. I like the little flare in this one, right? The caller was out of the house and the crew on the way in less than 40 seconds. You kept her safe. That's huge. Those 4 words at the end, can you imagine being a dispatcher reading that? Like, that's going to pump you up in a way that no other feedback could, right? You're actually saying that you saved someone's life that day, right? And we don't say that enough. We might say it in a big general way that like, oh yeah, dispatchers are really great. They're heroes and they save people's lives. But this is a specific example of this call taker was just doing their job, but we're reminding them that what they did actually saved the life of those people by getting them out of the house. And yes, maybe it was just a stove fire. Maybe it might not have caused the whole house to burn down, but that doesn't matter. The instructions that she gave actually kept the caller safe, and we need to remind the dispatchers of that once in a while. So I love the flare on this one. And the thing that I also like about these examples is that you can see different styles in all three examples. When we have multiple cues at agencies, that's gonna happen, right? So you guys, the three of you at this table, you're all at the same agency, right? So talk to me about the styles that you have for case review. Do we have one person that's more fluffy and snuggly and kind of soft and cuddly than the others, as I would say? Do we have one that's maybe a little bit has sharper edges? See, yep. Everybody's gonna have their own style when it comes to feedback, right? And when it comes to having more than one quality assurance person at your agency, the best thing that you can really do for your dispatchers is make sure, even with your own personal styles, that you're all staying calibrated, that you're still applying the performance standards in the same way. And this is where your style is going to come through in your comments, right? We're going to see. To me, this is one of those more fluffy, cuddly comments, right? Because it's got all the little like warm and fuzzy feeling things in it, which I really like. And if you're somebody who has maybe a sharper edge on your style, don't be afraid to incorporate some of this once in a while, right?
Motivate the cues that they go through, they make their little comments, maybe or maybe not,
Mhm.
but their overall review is every single time, good job.
Good job, yeah.
Good job.
Good job.
All you really get from feedback, you really don't, how do you motivate them to make more comments than just good job?
I would say sit down and have a conversation with them about just like what I'm having with you guys today, because that can be easy to do as well. What causes that, right? What causes your cues to get into this mode of good job, good job, good job, good job, good job? Maybe a little bit of burnout for sure, which is caused from what? What's at the top of that burnout? What's sort of above that rolling down? Staffing issues, exactly. All of it stems from staffing, right? And we are in a staffing crisis industry-wide right now. And so yes, I don't have a lot of time to make things warm and fluffy is what I hear a lot.
And I'm not saying that only one person does it, so
Right.
I fall victim to it sometimes.
Sure.
When we're trying to get the numbers done
Yep.
on
I hear
time
ya.
and get them reported,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody likes to be late, but I think we rush them.
I hear you.
We'll just throw out that real quick. Answer.
Right, you guys are trying to get your job done as quickly as possible, just like the dispatchers are, right? And again, those staffing issues are rolling downwards and trickling into what you're doing as well. And Mhm.
If you don't have a program that encourages a feedback loop. right,
Yes.
Why is the Q gonna spend more time like reviewing and making comments if they can just open it and close it again? Right?
Correct, sure.
Having a process that closes that feedback. They encourage the Qs to put more effort into the feedback.
Right. And absolutely, you're absolutely right, Melissa. It is circular. And so that's why, that's kind of why I brought this up as our first topic today, because I know that this is a challenge for everybody on the planet right now. Getting case reviews done in a timely manner when you may have to work the floor, you may have to work the phones, you may have to work the radio, right? So being able to carve out time to do case review is a challenge all by itself. But what I'm telling you and kind of what we're talking about with closing the loop is that, it's going to be an endless cycle, right? Your people are, if you're not taking the time to give them some good feedback that's kind of helping them to improve and focusing on the areas that they have strengths, then their performance isn't ever going to go anywhere, right? It's just always going to stay at the same sort of stagnant level. And so we have to find ways to get to them, to get through to them, to quit having them just look at the front and the back and chuck it in the trash, right? And so that's kind of why I'm talking about some of these different strategies. Let's do some random face-to-faces. Even if all you've got is 5 minutes, then find in your stack of cues a few of them that you know are at least compliant. Go out on the floor and just in public say, you know what, I just reviewed this call that you took the other day that was a vehicle fire. And I just want you to know that you did a really good job on that one. And so keep it up. Keep doing exactly what you're doing on those. That takes, 30 seconds, maybe a little bit longer because you had to review the call and make sure it was compliant. But the actual face-to-face piece can be out on the floor. It can be in front of everyone, takes 30 seconds. And I'll promise you that will have an impact. Whether they say anything about it right then or there, whether they grumble and go, I was just doing my job, it's no big deal. I promise you there's a little brain worm that's making its way in there, and it will impact not just that one person, but everyone else on the floor that heard it will impact their performance too. Okay. There's other things that you can do too that don't involve face to face, but still are a way of recognizing, right? Does anybody have like a bulletin board in their comm center that's in a public place that you are, recognizing your high performers and your people that are improving? What have you guys got? I love it. Okay, good. I always say whenever I visit agencies and they're like, looking for help on ideas of what to do, find someone at your agency that is a crafty crafterson. Is that you? Yep. Does everyone know what I'm talking about when I say crafty crafterson? It is absolutely not meant to be derogatory in any way. In fact, I myself am a crafty crafterson at heart. Last weekend, I was sewing pillows for my house because I'm like, oh, this, the house, this couch, I want to add some color to it. So I went and bought fabric and crafted some pillows. So I'm a crafty crafterson at heart. But what I'm talking about is there's always at least one at every agency that loves that kind of stuff, is crafty, has stickers, loves glittery, sparkly, pretty things. Give them a blank space. And if you can give them a budget, that's great. If not, find ways to let them be creative in working with the resources that you have available, and give them, the data that says, okay, here's who we want to recognize for their performance. How about you guys at your agencies? Do you have a bulletin board or some kind of space dedicated to this? Send it out in an email. Okay, that's good.
Overall agency.
Okay, okay.
And then-
But do you have anyone at your agency that you could task with this, with like a crafty space?
It was putting it on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
Backward, so everyone could see the standings.
Yeah.
so, Like improvement from the month before overall, or
Yeah,
people that tried to find it. Compliant.
sure. But you haven't had time because you're busy. So that's why I say, let's see if we can delegate that to somebody maybe on a night shift that loves that kind of stuff, right? Same thing with you guys in the back. If you're emailing it, that's great. But I promise you, having it displayed in a physical place somewhere is going to help. And don't feel like you have to do all of these things yourselves. You can task this out to somebody on the floor, especially if they are a crafty crafterson and they have a whole Tupperware rolling thing of, sparkles and glitters. She's laughing because she knows she has one in her trunk right now. I'm just kidding. I don't mean to pick on you, but, see, that's what I'm saying. Like, identify that person in your agency and let them run with it. Let them run with it. Even if it's just a whiteboard with some markers, if they want to draw pictures or put cool letterings or whatever it is, let them do it. Because I promise you, it will get through to people. It absolutely will. Even if they grumble about it or make fun of it or whatever, it's that little worm in their brain that is getting through. Okay. The other thing that I always remind agencies to focus on is don't only recognize the high performers. Yes, we do want to recognize the high performers, but what about that person that we know is trying so hard, but they're just falling short of high compliant? but we can see them. We can see them trying, we can see them improving. You can have a most improved award every month or every week or every quarter, because we don't want that person to give up. We want to make sure that we have a way that we're telling them, we see you, we see that you're trying, and we know that you're trying, and we want you to keep trying. And we are loving the improvements that you're making, even if it's not getting you over that hump of high compliance yet. Because if you don't recognize that, what's going to happen? They're going to give up, because they're going to eventually get to that point where they go, well, I'm never going to get my name up on that board. So what's the point? Right? I've tried so hard. I've done everything they've asked me to, and I just am not perfect. Right? And so if you're not perfect, you don't get your name up on the board. So please make sure that you find ways to recognize those most improved people regularly as well, because we don't want them to get lost in the shuffle, because they will give up on us if we don't find a way to recognize them. Okay. So these are just some examples of the formulas that you can use for performance recognition. Now, it does not have to be as wordy as this. Like I said, we're just really trying to make sure that we're attaching the good things that they did, making it personal, and telling them to keep doing that, right? When it comes to performance improvement, we also have a feedback for that one. Okay. And again, this one can be intimidating because it's got a whole formula to it, but I promise you it's not as intimidating as it looks. Future forward intro plus the scenario plus the strength if possible plus the correct action plus the education and reason. That's a big one too. The education and the reason, that all together equals that strengths-based feedback formula for performance improvement. So this is when they've made some errors and we want them to do things a little bit differently. This is your formula. I can see everybody writing some notes, so I'm going to pause for just a second before I move on to the examples.
What she was saying.
Mhm.
Mel was saying,
Yeah.
more respectful of
Yeah.
Speaking to them. Kind of noticed too, how do we encourage the supervisors to kind of engage in that conversation? Because like with us, the supervisors see those quality assurance as well.
Okay.
So getting them to kind of work with the staff and be like, okay, this is where you're struggling.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think having a similar conversation to what we're having today with them and making sure that they understand, yes, we know staffing is a challenge, but this is important. And this does need to be a priority. And this does need to be incorporated into a part of your workflow as a supervisor. It's not enough just to, take the feedback from the QA staff and hand it to the dispatchers. You need to be engaged as a part of the link in the chain as well. And you need to follow up on stuff, right? So I think that's probably where you start, is having a meeting with them to literally engage more with them and just explain to them, this is important and this needs to be a part of the priority. And make sure that they understand kind of what's behind some of this stuff too, that, we're doing the best that we can to not only just tell them what they're doing wrong, but also focus on the areas that they're doing right. Because the science proves that when you tell people, when you focus on the things that they are doing right, it increases the number of things that they're doing right and decreases the number of things that they're doing wrong, no matter what. And so it's not enough just to always tell them, here's the things you're doing wrong. We really have to try to find ways to catch them doing it right as well. And so, yeah, that's what I would recommend, is just maybe start with a sit down meeting with them to just make sure that they understand that that's part of their expectation, right? Because they might not for them, it might just be a lack of understanding of what their role is. What part do they play in that chain, right? Are they really just a middleman, or do we need them to actively engage? And sometimes if you've got like that supervisor person that is sort of in the middle, if they don't understand what any of the stuff is because they're not a Q, maybe that's where we start. Maybe we put them through some Q training so that they can understand what the stuff is that they're passing along, right? Because maybe that's why they're not engaging, because they don't really understand it, right? Are your Qs, or I mean, are your supervisors Q trained? Okay, good. That's good. So yeah, but are they, they're Q trained, but maybe they're not actively queuing,
All the supervisors.
are queuing. Okay, good.
They are main cues and myself right now. We don't have somebody separate, so.
So are they queuing their own people that they're supervising, or are they queuing other people's shifts?
We don't have a lot of employees.
Yeah.
We have 4 cues. They're queuing everybody.
Okay,
We try to hit at least one for everybody.
for each dispatcher, yeah. Okay,
Make sure that we try to keep it even.
Yeah.
Across the board, so everybody's getting.
good. Yeah, and that should be a focus, right? Because you definitely want everybody to get some feedback all the time, yeah. Okay. So again, yeah, it might just be a conversation of, hey, we've got to make sure that we are doing this in a holistic way, that we're not just checking a box here and pushing things through. Because this stuff really does have meaning to it. Okay,
Reach a lot. Cover all the supervisors. You call each month and bring up
okay, good.
back for your own information.
Okay, that's good. And then Rachel, what are you doing with that? Like, are your supervisors then having any kind of face-to-face conversations, or are they doing any of the things that we've talked about, any of the recognition for high performance or improving performance? Yeah,
Yeah, if you could help on the
yeah, please
with-
let us know, share your things that you're doing.
And if my room supervisor that doesn't have it already on file to. Because the other thing is getting them trained, sending them away for classes during the day. And 2 people that I,
Sure,
one of them is a night supervisor. And not being able to dedicate 3 days
yeah.
to go somewhere, or a week to go somewhere, not be on shift.
Mm-hmm.
Can't spare the bodies either.
Sure,
to separate, so I'm trying to come up with a class that would work for the night shifters to become.
okay. Yeah, that can be rough. Yeah, yeah, can't pick on people that aren't here. Right.
You have the ability, but they don't all.
Sure. Yeah, and again, we understand this whole monster of staffing is an ugly beast, and it's really hard to put these kinds of things as a priority when you really just need bodies with a pulse on phones and radios, right? Sure, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, we need more than a body with a pulse. You're right. We need good quality dispatchers, but yeah.
Mentor program,
Mhm.
which is a program, and you don't have to be school certified to take the PMP mentor program. Obviously, I recognize the issue of staff.
Yeah.
But it was very helpful looking at it from the perspective of not a Q, but maybe a supervisor on shift who's seeing the feedback from the Q, and then have to have that personal interaction with their staff member, right?
Yep.
Support that feedback, and how can I support you as the employee to receive and implement that feedback? So I found it helpful in that respect.
Sure.
How do we how do we, it's the supervisors, because we all have different. So that's something that we've been talking about lately is you review your Q reports with your staff. And everybody's different. So how do we get it all on kind of the same page so that like if Mary's reviewing with somebody, something that, let's say Doug did the review on, she doesn't quite necessarily understand his review. How is she supposed to review that with her staff?
Well, that's a good point, but I think that if we're doing good feedback.
Uh-huh.
right, We're identifying the action, the strength. We're doing all of that, then that would be easier for the other supervisor to reinforce that.
Yeah, you want to make sure that when you are doing feedback, that it can stand all by itself. That piece of paper, if we're printing it, or email, if we're, digitally reading it, that you don't have to be there to explain what your feedback means, right? I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Absolutely. And it's, in this case, we're giving, performance improvement feedback, right? You might also cite the rule or,
Mhm.
where in the protocols might be, it's on what could you use as a reference?
Mm-hmm.
Situation, and then that's easier for the supervisor to reinforce, go with the employee, find that reference, but the other thing I'll mention here, that sort of is the mentor thing, and I've seen a few times in my career, is having a culture within your center where the recipient can say, I don't think that's quite right, right?
Yep.
Like, and come
An
back.
appeal
to it, have that
process.
respectful Conversation, right? And if you don't mind, I would love to hear from Holden, because
Yeah.
they have a unique situation in our state where they provide quality assurance for 3 centers. So it is
Oh,
very
nice.
rare, I think, that their quality assurance staff actually sees the people that they're providing quality assurance for. So they may have a good process for them. Wait. So they do that queue for Fulton, Augusta, and Bangor.
Okay.
And they don't really see the people in Augusta and Bangor, but I think the feedback that they give is sufficient. People, if they have concerns or questions, they'll come on the guardian,
Mm-hmm.
and the queue will address it. And if it's something that they're not sure on, then they'll pass it on to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go in and do the call as well, just to see what's going on with it.
Yeah.
We have had some like FaceTime, team meetings with like
Mhm.
some people, if there's like something that we want to go over in person to have that face-to-face conversation, and we're trying to do more.
Good. Yep.
I also tell my people, like, so I queue my own people and queues her own in the building.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of times when they're logging in at night, they're reading it and I'm right there to ask, but
Mm-hmm.
I encourage them to ask or challenge something I've done because then I know they're reading it.
That's right.
And if you can give me a valid argument why you did what you did, like, show me your point of view. And so I like that part, so, because I know they're looking at it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like those two, they queue people on Fulton, and like she said, they're split, so she does have. And then we have people, who do specific, the queues for specific people, and each of the other 2 centers, so they're always getting feedback from the same people and
Mhm.
calibration.
Okay. Another thing, does everyone at your agencies, do your dispatchers have access to the performance standards at all times? I should see everyone's head nodding like this. If you're not sure, that's step number 1. As soon as you get back to your agency, make sure that you are putting a copy of the performance standards somewhere that dispatchers can access anytime they want. This is not super secret squirrel material. In fact, we want them to have access to it, right? Because that helps build credibility to our programs. That helps them to understand this is not just Meredith's opinion about how I did on this call. This is based on a rule that's in the book that you can read that's somewhere on the floor. If you don't have a printed version of it and you want a digital version to share somewhere, save on a network drive, save on the desktops on all the dispatch consoles, and you need a digital version, let me know and I will send it to you. Okay? You have a digital version available to you in Aqua, embedded right in Aqua. They should have access to this. Not only should they have access to it, but we also should be exposing them to this on a regular basis. Yes, we are exposing it to them every time we do feedback. But also, if you have opportunities where you're doing like any kind of CDEs, like you're maybe doing monthly memos or quarterly newsletters, or does anybody at your agency have like a little roll call or lineup that they come into before they go out onto the floor and you have like a little debriefing on anything? Yeah, see,
On the fly.
that's tough with scheduling as well, right? The agency that I worked at, that I grew up in dispatch in, that I talk about, they have, and even with all the staffing challenges, they have kept it, and I'm so happy that they have because it benefits them so much. All dispatchers, every day, they come into their shift 20 minutes before they sit down on the console. But no, listen, their scheduling is built around that. So every individual shift has a 20-minute, they call it a lineup, but it's essentially like a roll call or a little like debriefing, where when they start their shift, they don't just go from the parking lot to the console. They go into a room like this, they all sit together for 20 minutes, and that gives them a space to be able to have some little CDEs every single shift if they want to. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just get to sit in there and shoot the breeze, because that's healthy for dispatchers as well, right? They don't need to constantly have something that they're learning. But it also gives them a moment and a space for for the supervisors to talk about, here's some stuff that's coming over from the night before or the shift before, or, channel 4 is working this active shooter situation, and, or, whatever, barricaded suspect. So, whatever. And, we also have some wiggle room there as well, that, if channel 4 is working a barricaded suspect, whoever is assigned to channel 4 skips the lineup and goes straight to the floor to get debriefed from that person. So every shift has that 20-minute start built in there. I'm not telling you that's something that you have to do. I'm just saying there is a benefit to having that space together, right? And when you're small, when you only have 1 or 2 people changing at a time, maybe that's not really practical. But, if there's any kind of space that you are, like I said, doing a memo or, some kind of CDEs, use that space to talk through the standards, once a week or once a month. Send out one of the standards so that they can start to learn them. Because I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, the first time I got certified as a Q, it made me a better call taker. Did you guys experience that too? Right? I wish that every single dispatcher could take this Q course, because it really does make you look a little bit deeper at your performance.
They offer the course.
But we can't get people off the floor to attend the course, right? Yeah.
Anytime. Yeah. no, but,
Yeah. I mean, we have static classes, remote. Yeah. Yeah.
Nicole wants them.
I've sent her, she knows that I'm over the,
That's the 1 o'clock. What's the one?
go ahead, January.
Not that works with their night shift.
Just fine when they're available on the website. Let's go by this.
We also have, again, if we need to spin up a Q course specifically, you have a Q instructor that can teach that course. So let's work together and figure it out. Again, I really don't expect every single dispatcher to get certified in Q, because that's a time element, that's a cost element. There's lots of things that go into that. However, you can share these these performance standards with them. You can share what you're learning in Q class with them, and you should. More than just, mindlessly giving them feedback, let's teach them the whys behind these standards. And that's the part that we're talking about here in this performance improvement feedback formula, is that education reason piece, right? That's what I really love about this formula for how do I want them to do it better next time. All right, so I'm going to give you a little precursor to this first example. It's not my favorite example, okay? But I think you'll understand why we still use it as an example. All right, it's so wordy. Everyone looks at that and goes, oh my gosh, that's too much, okay? You don't necessarily need to do your feedback exactly like this, but there is kind of a point to it. So the first example that we have is when you find yourself. That's the future forward intro. Everyone gets intimidated by the future forward intro. The future forward intro can be 2 words: next time. Next time is a future forward intro, right? Sounds fancy like Dijon mustard, but it's just 2 words: next time. How do I want you to do it next time is the future forward intro. Okay. So when you find yourself becoming frustrated with an excited caller who's not listening to you, that's the scenario. And then here's our strength: patiently and calmly provide repetitive persistence. And then this is the part that I'm kind of like, okay, that's a little bit much, because they actually repeat it in that text 3 times. Okay. But again, it's kind of getting the point across when you read it. Sarah, I need you to listen carefully so I can help you. Right. And then that's the correct action. This repetition should help the caller calm down and focus on what you're saying. That's the education reason. That's the piece that really connects with the dispatchers. It's not enough just to say, I need you to do this differently next time. The first question that you're going to get asked if you say, I need you to do this differently next time, is what? Why? We're like toddlers, aren't we? Why? Why? But we really are at heart. We may not say it out loud, but we want to know the why. If someone's telling us, do it differently next time, or you did this wrong, immediately the whys are going off inside of our brains, whether we say it out loud or not. And so if we can add that to the end of our feedback, we will satisfy that little toddler that's inside of all of our brains. Okay. And that's what really helps them connect to these standards. And that's why, again, we don't want the standards to be super secret squirrel. We want them to be able to thumb through that and look at it anytime they want. So if I get feedback from somebody and I'm on a night shift and it's 2:00 in the morning, and I get this feedback that says, when you find yourself becoming frustrated with an excited caller who's not listening to you, patiently and calmly provide repetitive persistence. This should help the caller calm down and focus on what you're saying. Maybe I want to be able to look through and see, why did I get this feedback? Why was the way I said it wrong? Right. And so that education and reason piece is so important. And so if you have people that are struggling with the kind of feedback that they're getting from you, especially if it's performance improvement, consider going back to the basics of this formula and start by getting the standards in their hands, right? Making sure that they always have access to it. That's what makes sure that they understand that it's not just Meredith's opinion. This is based on the performance standards that are in place to help us measure if the tools that we're using are effective. Okay. Here's another example. In the future, again, next time, in the future, just 2 words for that future forward intro. When cardiac arrest is due to fentanyl overdose, that's the scenario. Select the ventilation's first pathway, that's the correct action. And then cardiac arrest due to narcotic overdose as a result of hypoxia, and the patient needs ventilations to get oxygen in the bloodstream. That's the education reason. Where do you think that last sentence came from when this quality assurance person was typing out this feedback example? Beautiful. From the book, right? They didn't make this up. This wasn't just like, out of thin air. This is actually from one of the rules, or it might have been in the actual protocols itself. It might have been in that big purple book, the textbook, right? But again, this is the reason. So then they understand that's why I need to go ventilations first. It's not just because Meredith said, it's because of this hypoxia thing and they need to get oxygen in their bloodstream. Okay, so I promise you that will get through. Then the last one is another police example. And again, this is just helping the dispatchers know that there's an echo for active shooter. So to achieve an early dispatch for an active shooter, that's your future forward and your scenario. Focus, which is our strength, on case entry question 4, which is tell me exactly what happened. So you see and select active assailant. This will send a 136 echo 1, so it can be immediately dispatched while you continue with protocol questioning. So this person missed the echo, which is a critical deviation in the performance standards, but this feedback helps soften that blow a little bit, right? And it also helps them to really know exactly what they should be doing next time. With this one, I'm also including a screenshot. I'm going to take a screenshot of ProQA and I'm going to circle where I want them to click on next time. That's how I can help them do better. So that's where, again, for me, I like not putting the overall compliance level at the end of their performance evaluations because they don't even see that word non-comp because immediately their brain just shuts down and they think they failed. But they'll actually see this. They'll see the comments and they will see my screenshot that's helping them for how to do it better next time. Okay. Questions on that or any other thoughts or feedback on strengths-based feedback? So hopefully that was kind of a good place to start to kind of kick this off today. Just reminding you guys what we want you to focus on when it comes to catching them doing it right. Because I got to tell you, there's a fatigue that kicks in as being a queue as well, especially the more cases that you're queuing every month, every whatever period we want to measure. It's tough. It's tough. And it can get really easy to slide into, man, they're always getting it wrong and focus all your time on the things that they're doing wrong, which we know that they need to improve. So we do need to spend some time on that, but don't lose track of focusing on the things that they're doing right. Okay. Because that's, if you really kind of start there, especially if they've been used to just getting a lot of negative feedback, if you start from a place that focuses on what they're doing right and their strengths, that's going to just tilt them right on their ear, right? They're going to go, wow, this is different. I like this. And they're going to immediately start listening, whether they realize it or not. It will get through. Okay. We know that. We know that when we focus on the things that they're doing right, it increases the number of things they do right and decreases the mistakes. Okay. All right. Any thoughts or comments from the listeners? Okay. All right. So what are some of the other areas that we want to talk about today? First of all, before I forget, let's go into Aqua because I want to show you a couple of things in there. I talked about how you have the ability to, you still can't see my screen. There we go. You see it now? Okay. All right. You have the ability to turn off the overall compliance in the incident performance report. If that's something that you need to be able to do, I want to show you how to do that right now in Aqua. And then I also want to show you how to do screenshots because I'm a big proponent for that. Okay, so in Aqua, under the agency employee information, you're going to go into your agency info. You probably only have one agency listed here, or perhaps those of you that dispatch or that queue for multiple agencies, you might have multiple agencies in here. But then you're going to just click on the agency that you want. And that's gonna open up kind of your agency setup. This is also where you would update the versions. So when you guys, is everybody in here on version 14 for medical now? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Doing that sometime in the next week or so.
Excellent, excellent. Yep. And we have a ton of, on that note, we have a ton of self-paced materials for dispatchers that cover the updates. So if you need access to that, let me know.
We just had them all with the
Good.
14.
Beautiful, beautiful. But this is where you then, once you start processing calls in ProQA on that new version, and the calls that you're going to be importing in are on the new version, you need to come in here to your agency setup and change your logic version. So that's where you would need to change it from 13.3 to 14.0. Because what that does is it makes sure that all of the language that is in Aqua matches what the new version is, okay? So you don't want to do this too quickly. You don't want to do it before you actually have updated all of your workstations with version 14, and then they start taking calls, and then you start importing in those calls. But then that kind of brings that language over. So that's where you would do that. And this is also where under the report setup, you can uncheck the box for show compliance level on incident performance report. Do you see that? So it's under the agency employee info tab. Inside the agency info button, open up the agency, and then it's this report set up in the middle. And then it's right there. You uncheck the box for show compliance level on incident performance report. So if you find that your people are doing that, where they're just reading the front and the back, or only scrolling down to look to see were they compliant or not, and not reading the rest of it, you can try turning that off for a little while. And they'll probably, and don't even, this is my favorite, don't tell them that you're going to do that. Because then if you have some of them that start coming to you going, I can't see if I'm high compliant or not at the end, that's how you know that they're actually reading them, right? So when I did this, like I said, I didn't tell anybody I was doing it. Just all of a sudden, now they don't have it. And the ones that were coming to me, that's how I knew that they were actually reading the feedback. And you don't have to turn it back on. You can turn it back on if you want. But for me, you can see that mine's unchecked because I prefer to keep it off. Because again, do they need to know that? Some of them, it will drive them crazy to not know, right? Those high compliant, high performers, they're like, I want to know, I want to know. It's all or none. Yeah. Yep. That's a good question though. Nope, it's not for specific. And if you think about it, that wouldn't really be fair if we only did it for one person. Yeah. So it's just all or none. But like I said, try turning it off for a while and watch what happens. It's a good social experiment because like I said, you will find out quickly the ones that are paying attention because they will think that something is broken. And they will, you know, hopefully they'll come to you. And then, like I said, that's how you know that they are reading your stuff. Okay. So that's where you can turn that off. Then you'll see if I go into one of my cases here, let me go in here because I got some that are reviewed. And I run an incident performance report for this one with detailed comments. I won't see my overall compliance. Now, you'll still be able to run all of those compliance reports that you need that show where everybody's at in the different categories. It just, the only thing that it will be removed from is that individual incident performance report that they are getting. Okay. So I was super excited when we started offering that because like I said, it's a really good way to kind of shake things up a little bit and get them paying attention to the feedback. So normally we would see at the very bottom, right? We'd see our overall compliance. And it's just simply not there anymore. So it's gone. That's it. Oh, it's still there. maybe this one was completed before I turned that off, but, so it won't show there when you turn that off. That was a bad example.
Wait, but we can still get that in the reports.
Yeah, you can still see it in all the other reports, all the compliance reports. But
Individual and say that we send out the individual. Cause I'll send out people forms and then their individual reports. Don't only get their reports
sure,
on the average.
Uh-huh.
So we don't want to-
correct. Yeah, where they're performing, how many they have in each category. Yeah. It only removes it from the incident performance report. Yeah. Oh, you know why? So I just remembered, I only did it for the one agency, so. Yeah, that person might have been with a different agency. That's the problem with my demo data. Sometimes I don't really know what all it's doing. Let me pull a different one now. Yeah, because I didn't do it for that agency. Okay, so now hopefully it's not there. There, see, now it's gone. Okay, so they just see your comments and just see the feedback on how they did with the call. Okay,
I think we still able to as recommended. So I guess what I did is figure. When it comes back with the review feedback, it tells you what it's been finding.
yeah, so under here, under the total compliance, yeah, it's still there. Yep. Or under, you're saying under this section, yeah, it's still there too, yeah. Mm-hmm, yep. Yeah. Okay, yeah, you'll still see it you'll still see it in every other place except for on that incident performance report. That's the only place that it won't display, which is the important place that we want to remove it from, okay? All right, so then I talked about screenshots. So how can we do screenshots in ProQA? So first of all, let me just start out with a case that's not reviewed. So I'm just going to go in here to this one. Okay. So screenshots, it's really important because there's a very specific way that screenshots work. And it's super finicky in Aqua. It's really strange. I've been begging the developers, like, please, can we fix this? Like, because it's really annoying how finicky it is, but they have it working and they're like, well, it's working, it's stable. We don't want to make too many changes to it because that might break the whole thing. Okay. So if you want to do a screenshot of something, so let's say that I wanted to do a screenshot of ProQA and talking about that, that one where they grabbed the case entry echo, right? So I'm going to do a screenshot of that case entry echo right here. So whatever screenshot tool you use, most Microsoft machines have this one called Snipping Tool that you can find, and it comes usually free, I think, with Microsoft. When you open it, you grab your screenshot. So you just click new here. And then I want to go like this and grab that. I think because I'm sharing screens, it's a little weird. Okay, so I grab that. And then if I want to draw on it, I can do that. So I can say, hey, click this right here. Don't forget about this right here. I can highlight it or, whatever. And then I just copy that screenshot. Okay. So I copied it. Then I go into my Aqua. The only place that you can put that screenshot is into this comments field, this like main comments field that's at the end. And the only way that it will take it is with a Control V. So you have to do Control V. Then you can see my screenshot with all my little arrows and my highlights. And it's saved. Now, these other little comment boxes that they have in Aqua, you could also do Control V and it'll look like it's in there, but it won't print from there. So don't use those. Okay. So you only want to put it in this one right here, the main comment box at the end. Then when I click my review feedback or review completed, and then I run my incident performance with detailed comments, now you'll see my screenshot on the last page. So it's all the way down there at the bottom. This was huge when we added this to Aqua, and it's probably been 7 years it's been in there. Yeah, it's been in there for a long time. But every time I go somewhere, I'm like, do you guys know you can do screenshots in Aqua? Because I'm a huge screenshot. I'm a very visual learner and a visual instructor. And so I am constantly using screenshots. And before this was available, I was like adding pages and stapling it when we were printing them, right? Or adding it to the PDF. So now you have the ability to put it right into Aqua. Okay. Did we have a comment from somebody that's online? I just saw something flash, but I couldn't tell.
Resize that, make it smaller. I think she put more visible in the comments.
Oh, this screenshot, can you resize it? I don't think you can. Let's try though. Yeah, I don't think it gives you the ability to change the size of it.
So, I think it's positive.
Um, No. No. You know what, though? Hang on, let me edit. Because I had it locked down. So let me try that first. I don't think it does. Oh, well, let's see if it works. Let's see if it works. Oops. Let's see if it works. Let me make it really small so that, there we go. Okay, so then we have to mark the review completed. Let's see if that did it. Ta-da, worked. Yes. Yes, it does. You can resize it. See, even I learned something today. Guess I never tried that. Good job. Thank you for asking that, Stephanie. Any other thoughts, questions? So while we have Aqua open, any other questions or things that you want me to cover in Aqua?
I think you can use does well, there's an app. Can you show us in Aqua, how to get to our reference material?
Ah, yeah, okay. So, the Q standards are right here. So at the very top of your Aqua screen, you have a little standard section and you're looking for EDQ. That's the standards. So, you've got that available right there. It is a PDF, so it's searchable. So you can use the Control F like Frank. And then if I just want to type in freelance question so that I can find the standard for freelance, then it takes me right to that section. That's my favorite thing about PDFs is that little searchable thing. So that's the performance standards. The other reference materials that you have available in Aqua, under the documents section, you have your Aqua user guide right here. So if you're not sure how to do something in Aqua, go there first, see if you can find the answer. If you can't, shoot me an email because maybe it's something weird. But you also have lots of other documents in here as well. The standards update, that's just a little memo from the academy about the new standard for sub chief complaint, some of the things that moved around. in the most current version of the standards. They are about to also release another update to the standards that will just have some minor things changed in it, moved around a little bit as well. I believe that's probably gonna come in the next version of, like, in conjunction with the next release version of Aqua. Okay. Also under here is, I find this one very helpful, the performance threshold document. Are any of you guys at your agencies using this performance threshold report? Does anybody not know what that is? Okay, let's talk about that one because that's a really good report. So first of all, this document under the documents section for performance threshold helps explain kind of what this is, and it also gives all of the really complex math that I am so grateful is in the background of Aqua, because I don't do very well at mathing. So essentially, here's all the explanations of the math, the steps 1 through 4. It calculates the average of all call taker performance, which is the performance average. Then it subtracts the performance average from each individual call taker performance, then squares the result, which is the performance squares. Then summing the performance squares and computing the average is the performance squares average, then computing the square root of the performance squares average. That makes my head hurt just reading that out loud. But essentially, what does all of this mean? What this means is we're using this report, and I will go ahead and show you in Aqua. I want to do this one because it's got a good amount of cases in it. Whoops, let me go back. So I'm going to do the performance threshold by agency, and I'm going to do this one. And I'm going to do a whole year. Oops. Oh man, I really messed it up now. A whole year. And I'm gonna do both of these because I can't remember which one has more data in it. All right, so this one. So what we're doing is we're essentially using this to help us determine, are there any people at your agency that are performing below kind of where the rest of your agency is performing, right? So in a really crude way, we would say, who needs to go on a performance improvement plan? But I don't like to say it that way because just looking at these numbers is not enough information to know if someone needs to go on a performance improvement plan. But this is a good place to start and take a look at how everyone in our agency is performing. Okay, that's essentially more what I like to focus on using this for. So what we're doing is every single compliance level is given a point value. So high compliance cases are given 10 points, all the way down to if a case is non-compliant, it only gets 1 point, okay? Then over here, you can see the number of cases that we have during that time period. I ran it for a whole year. Very important to know, you should never, ever, 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 ever run this report with less than 3 months of data. So always 3 months or more. For me, I usually run it for at least a year of data, because then we really know that's a really good picture of our agency's performance, okay? And so this is how many cases we have in each of those categories during this year that I'm looking at, okay? And then that's the point values, right? So that gives us a total score, if you will, of 556. So then when we divide 556 by 58, that's the number of cases total, then that gives us our agency cumulative performance value. Now, this agency only had 58 cases for the whole year. So let's see if this agency had more. Yeah, this agency had more. So this one, they had 550 cases and their point value was 4,989. Okay, so again, when we divide this number by this number, that's where we get our agency performance value. So essentially, this is where we're setting the bar for how everyone at the agency is performing. Then all that complex math that I just described, those 4 steps of the square root of the performance squares of the performance average of the sum of the squares, they take that and they calculate what one standard deviation would be below what the agency is performing at. So this agency is performing at a 9.07. So one standard deviation below a score of 9.07 would be a score of 6.66, which holy cow, that's scary by itself, triple sixes. Can we round that up or down? But anyway, 6.66 is your performance threshold. So one standard deviation below 9.07 is going to give us that number. So then it's showing us everyone's performance at the agency. And essentially what that is saying is then anyone that falls below 666 is you want to investigate further to see if they need any intervention, is how I like to explain it. We don't just automatically put anyone below a 6.66 on a PIP. We want to investigate further because sometimes you might see someone in here, like you see this person right here that has a 1. I already know without looking what probably happened. They probably had 1 call and it was non-compliant. Okay. And so we don't just automatically put this person on a PIP. What do we need to do when we find someone like that in our reports? Say it again. Okay, look at some more data. Yep, you said it in the back. Yes, make sure that we have some more data. Either queue more calls or look further back. We need to look at a bigger picture for them because 1 call, it does not tell us a good indicator of their actual performance. Everybody can have a bad day or a bad call, okay? And so that's not enough. So when I say, when you look at this, the way I like to teach it is when you see anyone that falls below a 6.66, that means you need to dig deeper to determine if they need intervention. Because guess what? This person might be a supervisor that never takes calls. And so they only had 1 call in there and they totally tanked it. We can't queue any more calls for them because they don't have any more calls in there. We might want to sit down with them and go, okay, is it time for you to go back through an EMD refresher because you're never on phones? But we're not going to fire that person, right? So again, it's just investigate further to determine if they need any intervention at all. Okay. But that's kind of what this is used for, is to give us a good picture of how everyone at the agency is doing, and then also each individual kind of compared to the rest of the agency. Now, knowing what you know, what I just explained about this report, how is this agency doing that I'm looking at right now? What do you think? Are they doing pretty good or pretty bad or what? Pretty good. I mean, the fact that their performance value, their cumulative performance value, which by the way, I visited an agency the other day and they were like, well, we went to run the CPV report. And I was like, you're going to have to help me with that acronym. And they're like, the cumulative performance value report? Like I'm an idiot. And I'm like, listen, I don't acronym that one. Okay. So I'm sorry, I did not understand that. But yes, their agency cumulative performance value is a 9. And the highest you can get is 10. So that agency is doing pretty good. And they have a whole bunch of people that are 10s. Now, again, it could be that that person only had 1 or 2 calls and they aced them, or it could just be that they're that good. We don't know. If we look at the other agency, we see some different numbers. Well, their number is even higher. It's a 9.59. So their threshold is an 8.16. So yeah, they do have 1 person that's got a 5. So yeah, these agencies are doing pretty good, but again, they don't have very many calls either. Okay. So hopefully that helps you with what that performance threshold report is. Okay. Any other questions on any of the other reports in Aqua while we're in here? We need to take a quick break, don't we? We've been at this for a while. Yeah. Okay,
Rachel Cohen said we used it to determine who would be a good candidate for a refreshment.
excellent. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Yes. Good job, Rachel.
This been discussed, we offer 2 refreshment courses. Well, not refreshment courses, but they're one day.
Is this, Jerry teaches those? Right,
Jerry,
yeah. Mhm.
Usually.
He ties them into your EMD, yeah.
Yes, we have EMD and then the next day after EMD. wherever we go.
You just do a full 8-hour
South
north, yeah.
area.
Excellent.
So the last one that we did at Cumberland, we had folks from Cumberland and folks from Waldo there. And it was really great to have them interact with each other because all of our staff operate a little bit different.
Sure.
We have the same software, we have the same protocols, we
Yeah.
have the same base training, but there are so many variables beyond that.
Oh, yeah.
Different response plans or resources available in communities. So it generated some really good discussion. So
That's awesome.
I encourage folks, like, even though it's being held at, one center folks there, they're gonna learn a lot more than if they just stayed in
Yeah.
Worcester and talk about more things.
Right, exactly. Excellent.
Try to move around.
Good. That's awesome.
Almost Canada.
Almost Canada. I love it. Okay, so 10 minutes? Okay. When it comes to universal standard number 1 for as written, the standard says all questions and pre-arrival instructions will be read as written. And when you are kind of evaluating this in Aqua, your options are asked correctly, asked incorrectly, or not as scripted. You also have the option in Aqua for obvious, right? Or NA. And then the other option that we want to talk about today as a part of this standard is trivial alterations, which, like I said, if you remember from your exam, there's a question on the EMDQ exam that talks about the difference between anybody or anyone. And that's a trivial alteration. And essentially what we're saying is if they use if the scripted question is anyone and they use anybody, that's okay. And we just mark that as correct. That doesn't even need to be marked as not as scripted because those two terms essentially go hand in hand. Anyone, anybody. That's just a correct for that trivial alteration. So kind of the reason behind this standard is, it's not moving, is it? Hang on. Oh, it's because I have it open too many places, I think. There we go. Where did it go? Sorry about the technical issues. There. There we go. Yes, can you see? Okay. Okay. So the reason that we have this in place is, again, the idea here is when call takers use the same phrases over and over and over again, they develop the ability to use these from memory, right? Essentially, we're building muscle memory. So that when someone is screaming in their ear, it's easier for them to just deliver this because they have that little prompt on the screen in front of them, right? Baseball analogies, basketball, golf swing, same kind of concept here. But where it gets into asked incorrectly is adding the phrase, do you know, or can you tell me, to the beginning of a question, because that changes the intent of the scripted instruction or question or instruction. So do you have dispatchers that are doing this? Okay. And so what kind of feedback have we tried and what's happening?
I cited
Okay.
standards to them.
Yeah.
and it's just regular, do you know?
Do you know like, is it on every question or just in specific
Most
scenarios?
interviews where I've seen
Okay,
it's this, I don't know.
sure. Are they doing this only with third-party callers? We see that a lot, right? Don't we? Yes. Uh-huh. And so maybe we can try to break that habit with kind of some more in-depth education with them about how third-party callers can still sometimes know information, right? And the reminder of the fact that can you know, or can you tell me, or do you know? Can you tell me doesn't bother me as much as do you know? Because can you tell me is almost more of a transition in my opinion, but do you know, how old he is, or do you know if he's awake? Do you know if he's breathing? Those kinds of things. That definitely changes the intent of that scripted question, right? The other examples that they give here are clearly changing the intent of the scripted question, right? Instead of saying a prescribed inhaler, they say an unused inhaler. Instead of saying any personal items, they say travel items. And instead of hazardous materials, they said dangerous items. So clearly those are changing the intent of the scripted question. It gets a little bit trickier with those do you knows or can you tell me's added to the beginning. And again, that the reason why that makes that incorrect. And I have a lot of times I have had cues interact with me too and kind of harp on the fact that, you know, do you know if he's breathing? The answer could be yes, but we don't know if that's the answer to do you know or the answer to his breathing, right? So essentially that's why it can be so confusing. And so that's another good way that you can explain it to them, right? Is that do you know is essentially asking a separate question. And it's potentially even just extending the interrogation, which is why it's a deviation, because we don't want to waste time. We want to try to just get right to it. And so maybe what we can also do with those people, if you notice that they have kind of a habit of doing that with third-party callers, is before they even get into asking the scripted questions, maybe just let them know that what they can do at the beginning of the interrogation is say, I'm going to ask you some questions. I realize you're not there, but just answer the best you can. And then that could hopefully then break them out of that habit of saying, do you know? Because then because that's the other thing that I hear a lot of times from call takers is the reason why they're adding that do you know is because they don't want to sound stupid, right? To this third party caller, they don't want to sound stupid saying, is he breathing? So they add, well, do you know if he's breathing? And so, like I said, I'll kind of give them an alternative. I kind of think of it similar to when my son was little. He was like probably 3 or 4 years old, you know, newly talking, newly interacting, and he learned a curse word from somebody, you know, we don't know who, but he would say this curse word, and I told him, you know, you can't say that. You can't, that's not a nice word. You can't say that. And I learned with him quickly that he kept saying it because he thought that it was like the appropriate thing to say in this specific situation. He was saying holy SH word, right? And so then I was like, all right, let me try a different tactic. So instead of saying that, you should say holy cow, right? Because for whatever reason, he just thought that's what you say when you see something surprising is holy SHIT, right? And so then I'm like, let's say holy cow. And so that worked because it was like he needed a substitute in his brain. So that's why I kind of think with dispatchers that are saying, do you know, instead of telling them don't do it that way, give them an alternative because again, they're doing it because they're trying to help with customer service. They don't want the caller to think that they're an idiot, that they're not listening, that they're just asking stupid questions. So give them that alternative of explaining to the caller on the front end. I realize you're not there, trying to get some information for the responders. Is he awake? Right? And hopefully that will break that habit. So give it a try, see if it works. Okay. All right, what about not as scripted? Are we seeing a lot of these? We really, if you think about the way that not as scripted is designed, hopefully we're not seeing very many of these, right? Every once in a while we might see one, but hopefully we're not seeing a whole bunch. What are you guys experiencing with not as scripted? Anything? Any questions or thoughts or comments with it?
I guess they're like, hey, so are there any hazards, you know, like any falls down trees in the road?
Sure,
They give examples after.
sure. Yeah,
I mean, obviously changing the question because now they're giving that option.
right. And if you look at this standard, it's saying it should be used when they don't read the question as written, as long as their verbiage doesn't change the meaning, intent, or objective. Okay. And so it's not quite what you're talking about. What you're talking about is more of like they're adding an enhancement on the end, or, you know, maybe perhaps teetering into a leading question, things like that. This is more like the question as scripted might be, is anyone injured? And they say, is anyone injured at all? So they add like that little tiny thing on the end. Doesn't really change the intent or meaning of the question as scripted, but they, you know, added some words. So essentially we need to mark that as not as scripted. Or sometimes I might hear instead of saying, are you with the patient now? They might say, are you with the patient right now? Again, doesn't really change the intent, because we are looking for, are you with the patient in this moment in time? So right now versus now, doesn't change the intent. Okay, so it's a little bit more subtle than that.
On these non-scripted,
Mm-hmm.
are they marked as a deviation?
No,
They don't say point out, right?
right,
So, but they are useful.
they are useful.
In the podcast, just really, talk to Dr. Clausen
Mm-hmm.
about the orientation of the protocol, and in their discussion, he talked about, the origination of the case entry question of tell me exactly what happened,
Mm-hmm.
and how that's changed over time, essentially to match what people are saying. So
That's
because
right.
It's not scripted, doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It helps to identify what's a more natural way of saying something. If everybody's doing it this way, maybe the protocol.
Right, and that's why we're tracking it, right? Because, yeah, so the exact example that Dr. Clausen spoke about was the scripted question in the protocols when it first started was, what's the problem? And then somewhere in the 90s, 2000s-ish, it became, what's the problem? Tell me exactly what happened. Then that quickly was like, that's too wordy. It feels like we're taking too much time. So then it became, tell me exactly what happened. And that was released in like 2007-ish, I think I forget what he cited that as, but somewhere in the early 2000s-ish. And he said that when we changed the script to tell me exactly what happened, we listened to a whole bunch of cases, and dispatchers were essentially, the way he described it at first, were doing it wrong. And they weren't going back to what's the problem, tell me exactly what happened. They were adding the word okay at the front of it. Okay, tell me exactly what happened. And so then we went, okay, well, let's just put that in the script, because it's a natural transitional word, and everybody's doing it. So let's just go ahead and put that in there, because it makes sense as a transition. So that break between address, phone number, then, okay, tell me exactly what happened. And yeah, that's also kind of the design behind these not as scripted. We want to catch them because that helps us to know, us meaning me at Priority Dispatch in the Academy, to know, is there a better way to ask this, right? The example that I like to give is a police example. The key question in police was, were weapons involved or mentioned? And I used police protocol for many, many years. And I swear to you, every single time I saw that question on my screen, I asked it as, were any weapons involved or mentioned? I don't know why my brain inserted the word any into that script. And I think now it's, were any weapons involved, I think is how it's scripted. So eventually it did make it into the script, because I was probably not the only person that just kind of, the brain was inserting that extra word. So that's the intent behind not as scripted. So that's why I say, hopefully we're not seeing too many of these, because if we are, then that means that our script is really, really broken. So we should only see these when it's something just slightly different, like those examples we gave, right? Are you with the patient right now? Is anyone injured at all? Were any weapons involved, right? Those kinds of extra little tiny things that don't change the intent. The other part that Dr. Clausen talked about in the podcast was, when we changed the script to, okay, tell me exactly what happened. Don't ask me how, but we had a whole group of cues out there that for some reason, if somebody left off the word okay, they were marking that as a deviation. And that was never, ever, ever, ever the intent of adding that to the script. It's a transitional word. So if you say it, great. If you don't, fine. If you use another word that's a transitional word that's acceptable, that's great too. Standards 8 had it as a deviation, you're saying?
Yeah. Version.
Standard,
There's
it would have been, we're on standards 10, so it might have been standards 9, okay.
remember it saying if they leave off the word okay, it's a major deviation.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that was never the intent.
Cause I was like, serious?
Yeah, right.
But, and I do believe the instructor I have, Fred.
Oh, Fred.
I just remember. he
Ugh.
told me that-
Yeah, Fred. He's not an instructor with us anymore. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I think.
Yeah, I don't know.
But.
I think he is still around.
Stressed about that.
Yeah, well, we've learned to do better, so now, no, we're no longer taking a deviation if they leave off the word,
But
okay.
now-
That's right. Yes, yes. Find the ways that they're doing it right. Yes, absolutely. You're right.
Just take off for every possible thing that has gone on.
And the unfortunate thing is that honestly, it was never written that way. It was interpreted that way by some instructors that then taught it that way to some cues that then cued it that way. And it just like perpetuated out like this, like poison out in the water source or something. I don't know, but, I'm really glad that it feels like now we've gotten a handle on it and I think we've cleaned up most of the oil spill, if you will, or the poison spill. Yeah. Yeah, if it had, that's why we just kind of talked about that during the break, is maybe doing some things about that. For those of you that it's been a long time since you went through a full Q course, yeah.
The PMD was done in probably 2012,
Yeah.
and then whenever the fire, it was done,
Mm-hmm.
and I was part of the first protocol.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the performance standards now, the way that we are really teaching it is we're trying to focus on the ways that they're doing it right. We're also trying to teach the concepts of reasonableness, which is a really hard concept to teach to people if you think about it, because it's very abstract. It's not anything that you can grab with your hands. And so the concepts of reasonableness, for some people, they embrace it with open arms and go, yeah, come on in. We're warm and fluffy and we like it here, right? Other people really push back on this concept of reasonableness. And so there is a happy place in the middle that everyone can live harmoniously, I promise. And so yeah, because the intent of reasonableness is to, again, give call takers the benefit of the doubt, right? They had one crack at it. So if we're sitting here in this room and hashing it out and we can't, as a group of 12 or however many people we have in here, we can't come to a consensus and agree if something is a deviation or not. Essentially, the call taker gets the benefit of the doubt. And certainly we can educate if we ever do come to an agreement on, maybe consider this for next time. But that's not a place that we ever want to take a deviation for a call taker if it's one of those gray areas, right? Especially if what they did was reasonable and safe, right? As long as what they did was reasonable and safe, then yeah, we don't want to beat them up, because all that does is erode away at our process and our credibility as cues. Because then we get that reputation of just giving everybody a black eye, right? And that we're nitpicking, and as the president of my company would say, we're picking at the nits on the nuts of the gnats, right? And that's the example that he famously gives all the time. And that's never, ever, ever what the Q process was intended to do. It's hard enough. It's hard enough for us to do what we have to do with all the things and people screaming in our ears and screaming on the radios and all the pressure. Then for us to get out a microscope days later and look at it to that level is not the intent. The intent is, if there's a really big place that we need to improve upon, let's focus on that. And then let's make sure that we're catching and rewarding and recognizing when they get it right. Okay. All right, so that's the thing behind the not as scripted, was again to help us track So if we're seeing the same, like, like I said, I was always putting in that word, any weapons involved. If we see that happening over and over again, we start tracking it, because then if we're seeing that happening a lot, or when you guys are doing feedback on your case reviews, if you're seeing a lot of deviations in this not as scripted area, then it's time, especially if they're similar, like they all are doing it the wrong way, but the same wrong way. Then it's time to start looking at, let's change the script. Let's submit a proposal for change to the script, especially if there's benefit to it, right? Because that's how even, okay, tell me exactly what happened evolved over the years, right? From listening to you guys, tell us how you like it. Trivial alterations, we talked about that. These are not as scripted, these are just correct. So the difference is between anybody, anyone, things like that. This is the one I wanted to get to next, is the acceptable clarifications or enhancements. Do we have anybody that's struggling with this at your agencies? So are we seeing a lot of deviations for this? I see that there's something in the chat. Okay.
Changing the wording, might make the question yes or no question, which. also
Sure.
Meeting.
Yep.
The comments are put into the box.
Yes,
Don't go to the employee on the performance report.
correct.
How does the employee know which part they've taken wrong if they don't get their comment? But she's told them to alternate the bottom comment box.
Sure. Okay, so what she's talking about here is, let me pull up a case so we can, oh, let me get one that's not reviewed. Let me go in here. Okay, so she's talking about the NAS box that pops up. So if I'm in case entry and I mark this one as a 4, then I get this little box. I'm not, am I sharing? Shoot, I'm not. It's always the PowerPoint that hijacks my, what's happened here. I have it open too many times. There we go. Can you see now? Okay. Yes. Ah, okay. All right. So if I mark something like this, tell me exactly what happened as not as scripted, I get this little NAS form that pops up. Any comments that go in here are not seen by the call taker, is what she's accurately telling us. Okay. So yeah, you could either copy this comment and also put it here in this comment box, because then it will show up, or at the comment box at the end. Yeah, because the intent of this one is internal tracking. Do we need to be submitting this for PFC, things like that? Typically what I like to recommend that you put here is, how did they say it that was not as scripted? So that we can kind of capture, because that's how we can then determine, is this something that everyone is asking, as were any weapons involved or mentioned, or is it just Meredith that has a little glitch in her brain and keeps adding that word? Okay. But yes, you're right. We should, I mean, if the call takers care, because remember, it's not a deviation. So we can definitely let them know that not as scripted is not taking a weighted deviation. But I hear you that if I'm a call taker and I'm getting my feedback and I see a little yellow and I don't see a comment, I don't really know what that means. And so I like to have a comment there that at least lets me know what that means. So when you're adding those comments, also make sure that your dispatchers understand that this is not a deviation, that we're tracking this because potentially we could need to submit this for a change to the protocol. But like a best practice way to do that also is to remind them what the scripted way to say it would be, right? So, yeah,
It doesn't necessarily show up where the question is wrong.
this comment box, you mean?
Yeah,
This one?
I think, so. I think,
You're-
yeah, like
Are you
the-
talking about in key questions? Cause there's only one? Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or it might be also for PDIs, there's only one,
Yeah, where it shows up there's some-
kind of at the bottom, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which PDIs they missed, yeah. How do you get that information back out? Um, that's a really good question with kind of a loaded answer. Because really the answer is there isn't a report that you can run that will just show you, here's all the comments that I've put in for not as scripted for the last year. The only place that you can really kind of dig it out would be under the drill down report and then look for not as scripted. So under your reports, let me go, let's see, this one. Under the comparison report, no, not the QI reports has the drill down. This is the one that you could, and let me just go in there because I know there's a lot of cases in there. This is where you could kind of potentially see. That looks good. Because then over here you have the ability to see the not as scripted, so then you can kind of see what it was. But
market cap, but so when did you say that threshold is?
yeah. So that's something that you need to kind of get together with your team as a Q team and decide. You guys need to decide how long you're gonna let that go. We don't really have an established threshold for that at the academy. Because again, if we're marking it as not as scripted, that means that it doesn't change the intent of the scripted question. So essentially, we're not taking a deviation, we're just tracking it to see, you know, if there's any remediation that's needed or if there's a change to the script that's needed. And so we don't really set that time. You'll see that the settings of Aqua set by default will set a trending time of 180 days, but that's just like a default set in the system that you can change under your agency info. So if you wanted to set your trend for there it is, the NAS look back days, see by default it's set for 180, but you could make it larger or smaller there. So if you wanted to shrink it down to 30 days, you could. But again, it's not, this is one of those things in Aqua that like it was introduced into the software and it was a really cool idea and concept, but we haven't really evolved it very much and done much with it. There's not like a specific NAS report. There's not really a way to dig out those things that are happening. It's just more at the individual level, just to let the dispatchers know, hey, we heard this thing, but it's not wrong, so there's no deviation, but we're just letting you know that it's technically not as scripted. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Okay. All right. Any other questions with that? Okay. So that was a lot of discussion about, incorrect, not as scripted, correct. Chief complaint selection, am I hearing that there's maybe some issues with chief complaint selection for specific protocols, or are we doing pretty good on chief complaint selection? Okay. Again, oh, that's what I wanted to talk about was the appropriate clarifiers. This is one that I hear a lot from agencies, people struggling with. Is from tell me exactly what happened the call takers are not getting enough information and then they're asking inappropriate clarifiers later on. Is that happening with you guys? Yeah, I'm kind of hearing that a little bit in the background here. So let me get to that standard so we can talk about that. Get me in here. And so what we're talking about is the standard for acceptable clarifications and enhancements, which I believe is standard 3. There it is. Yep, I was right. That never happens. Okay. There we go. Okay. So the key to standard 3 is that once the scripted protocol question or instruction has been read as written, they may rephrase using language equivalent or nearly equivalent. If the caller does not understand the scripted protocol question, they answer ambiguously, or they don't answer after a reasonable period of time. The biggest place that I see call takers slipping up on this is from the tell me exactly what happened. And it's funny, and I swear to God, this Lawson talked a lot about this as well during this episode, because he talked about how that question, the tell me exactly what happened, is probably the most important question in the entire protocol. The most important question, including CPR instructions, everything. It all falls down to tell me exactly what happened. And dispatchers can sometimes have a tendency to get impatient with callers, right? Because callers want to start rambling on some stuff and they're like, just get to it, right? Or they say one of those little buzzwords and the call taker just cuts them off and goes, right? Like, I'll give you an example. Tell me exactly what happened. Oh, I need an ambulance for my grandma. She's really, really, really sick. And we just, oh my gosh, I'm so scared for her. I need to get her checked out. She's 88 years old. I don't know what's going on, but I really want an ambulance to come check her out because, something's not right. She's just so, so sick. Do I have enough information there to choose a chief complaint? The dispatchers will go to protocol 26 for that, right? Because they're tired of listening to me ramble, perhaps. Or they heard that little buzzword, that word sick got thrown out, and they think that that is an acceptable description of what's happening with grandma.
If something is not right, grandma is not acting right. And they're not aware, so it's gonna be a 26 one.
Yeah. When in actuality, if the call taker would have followed up with me and said, okay, I understand you're scared about grandma. Tell me exactly what happened. Well, the whole right side of her face is all droopy. She's not making any sense. And this has been going on for 6 for that one. No, we're going to the stroke protocol. But again, I think it's a combination of call takers get a little bit impatient, but also, again, they hear those buzzwords and they just go with it. We need to really do a good job. So again, here's in a nice little box with a pretty little bow on it. Here's your next CDE. If you're seeing this happening, focus on with your dispatchers the fact that protocol 26 was always designed to be the protocol to use if nothing else fits. It's in the definition on the protocol. It says an uncategorizable chief complaint. Yes, it has a whole laundry list of things that are, categorized in there, but it's only supposed to be used if nothing else fits. If there's any other identifiable chief complaint, we should be going to that. And instead, it's often the opposite. I see at a lot of agencies. And it doesn't help that when I pull the data on all of the agencies that are sharing their data with us, we have about 200, I think we're almost up to 300 agencies worldwide that are sharing data with us. Guess what the number one chief complaint protocol is? It's protocol 26 every time. So that doesn't help, but it really should only be used when there's nothing else that fits. So if we don't have enough information from tell me exactly what happened, but we have that buzzword of sick, we need to be teaching our dispatchers that that's not enough information. We need to follow up with either repeating, tell me exactly what happened, or an acceptable clarification or enhancement. What are their symptoms? What made you call today? Tell me what you mean by sick, right? Tell me what you mean by X, Y, or Z. Because that's another one that call takers will fall into when they say, oh, yeah, my 93-year-old grandpa, he's got CHF and pulmonary edema, and we need an ambulance for him right now. They hear that CHF, or maybe the caller says, well, he's got congestive heart failure and he's got pulmonary edema and we need an ambulance for him right now. So they go to heart problems, right? Which again, that's a diagnosis of something that he's had for 6 years. That might not be anything to do with what's happening today. So if they get something like that, but it's not enough to tell us exactly what happened to make them call today, we need to be using acceptable clarifications. And you can see that the standard even expects it, that we're asking, we're going to mark it as asked incorrectly or given incorrectly if they don't clarify, right? If they give from tell me exactly what happened, I need an ambulance for grandma, she's really, really sick, and a call taker does not clarify, then we would mark that as asked incorrectly, because the expectation is that they will follow up to find out exactly what happened.
Ask the question twice, like, the vague answer.
So there is, there is a standard that references asking the question at least twice before moving on. But yeah, they can certainly, as long as the first time they ask it, it's as scripted. The second time, they don't have to do it as scripted a second time. They can reword it as long as at least once it's been as scripted. But then, yeah, if they ask it again the second time and the caller still is not answering, then they're permitted to move on. But sometimes, how do we move on, right? If they haven't given us anything. So that's where, again, rewording it in a way that doesn't change the intent. I wish, though, that this, the way that it says here, the language equivalent or nearly equivalent, I wish that it also included, but does not lead the caller, because that's where we get into this part of the standard. The caller may refer to previous statements, including those spontaneously provided, to introduce the clarification, but the call taker must then ask a complete question to confirm an objective answer. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about, you said she can't get out of the car, but I need acceptable clarification or enhancement to the question of, is anyone pinned or trapped? You said this, but I need to confirm scripted question is essentially what we're looking for there. Okay. The wrong way to do it is what? Yep. You said she's trapped, right? Yeah. She's trapped, right? That's a leading question. And so again, we want to make sure that when they're asking, if they're introducing it with something that was already volunteered, that they're also confirming an objective answer to the question. Okay. That's tricky. That's really tricky, but you can understand, I think, hopefully, why this is so discouraged. You said she's trapped, because then the caller's just agreeing with us, right? We're asking them to agree with us instead of give us objective information based on something that they volunteered previously. Do any of your people struggle with that? Okay. And so again, referring them back to this, and maybe, again, maybe that's another CDE for you. Maybe that's the first one that you do when you get back, is this one right here. And again, here's the examples that we just talked through. The one that's wrong is the one that's in red. The two top ones are acceptable. this middle one is, this one is the best practice. You said she can't get out of the car, but I need to confirm, is she trapped? Because that's the scripted question. Then the middle one is acceptable. It's not my favorite, but it's acceptable. You said she's trapped in the vehicle. Is that correct? But then the bottom one is the incorrect. Okay.
These are acceptable clarifications or enhancements, but tend to be more freelance if they're digging for more information.
Yeah.
But
And yep. And so that's a good example. And you said it's Dave? Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, that can be really tricky. It's kind of a slippery slope there. But the difference between a freelance and something that is considered an acceptable clarification or enhancements kind of points to what was it that they were clarifying, right? You can ask all kinds of questions. If you're clarifying, tell me exactly what happened, right? Especially if they volunteered just a little bit or some things and you need to clarify. But your questions cannot be leading. They cannot be leading you down a specific path. We need to be able to point to a question, a scripted question in the protocols and be able to justify that what they just asked is an enhancement or a clarification of that scripted protocol question. Right? So that's where, from tell me exactly what happened. We need an ambulance for grandma. She's really, really sick. What kind of symptoms is she having is not a freelance question because it's enhancing. Why are you calling today? Tell me exactly what happened. Right? But if we were to say, instead of what kind of symptoms is she having, if we were to say something like, well, is it a heart attack, a stroke? Is she having chest pain? Is she bleeding? What's happening? Those are all leading the caller down a specific pathway. So the open-ended question of tell me what kind of symptoms she's having is more a clarification of tell me exactly what happened. Okay. Is that kind of what you were saying there, Dave? Okay, awesome. Okay, let's see. What else do we have on our list here? What, you guys had a list for me. Have I missed?
I have one thing that I.
Yeah. Um,
Think of it.
I know, right? So keep a running list between now and when I come back. I know, I know. Um,
I have a running list.
okay, what do you got?
Subject in the vehicle with wires down on it. No smoke, no flames, no argument, nothing. A question of, when you get the question, is that contact?
Interesting. Let me pull that one up.
Wires are laying in the car? Yeah, there's somebody in the car? Yep. From my experience, yes, I just had a really bad one. It was, I did that well.
Uh-oh.
Bigfoot don't have-
So you're wondering how to answer the question.
So he was going along and, trying to figure out. Obviously.
Okay,
Then the traffic accident with fires down on the car. Maybe the traffic accident would be about a protocol.
Electrical. Yeah, so stuff had-
this one has wires down.
The question popped up. I think might have been on electrical.
This one. I mean, to me, I I honestly, I don't think I'm gonna, based on what you're describing to me, that it's a person in a vehicle inside the car and they get a question. If they answer no, I'm giving them credit. If they answer by both answers in that situation. I think the main thing is making sure that we advise the caller the best instructions for safety. Right. And so that's why I think I can justify either answer there. Because no, technically they're not in contact with the wires like we would typically think of, right? But that doesn't mean that they're not still in danger of becoming in contact with the wires, right? And so I feel like a yes or a no answer, in my opinion, that call taker gets credit for either one. Yeah, in that situation. I mean, did they ask the question?
So this product is not what I.
Okay. Cause that's my other thought is like, did they even ask this question or did they were they trying to figure out how to self-answer it? Mm-hmm. Cause that's the other thing is, making sure that call takers remember if they've been given information about something and they get to one of these questions, what's the best way to find out the best way to answer this question? Ask the caller, right? And go with what the caller says. Because, again, we're not there. We can't touch anything, see anything. So that's why these questions are there, is to ask the caller to describe the scene to us. So that's, I think, feedback just based on, the scenario you gave me with, I always have to give that caveat of without listening to the recording of this call, right? I would say this, but I could be wrong if we listened to the recording and found something else. Okay. All right. That's a good one. Right. So tell me exactly what happened. Was it a traffic accident? It was, uh-huh. Someone was driving home and all of a sudden got tangled up in some wires that were down because they didn't see them and they drove through them. Okay. So again, I don't think that they're trapped. But would I like discount a caller for a call taker for marking trapped? Again, did they ask the caller, is anyone trapped? And the caller was like, well, I can't get out because of these. Asked it and the caller said yes, right? So that's where it gets a little bit tricky, right? So I mean, I feel like there's not really a wrong answer there. Because yeah, as long as you're passing along to your responders that this person is not pinned or trapped in the vehicle and needing extrication, they can't get out of the car because there's a danger outside the vehicle. Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. What else?
So an alarm company calls because they have somebody call them, that their house is on fire, or kitchen's on fire, the house is on fire. We process that as alarm company call, or we process that?
I would process that as a structure fire. Yeah. And I would want to grab that poor caller by the shoulders and go, what are you doing? Call 911. No, I'm sorry. That's not funny to joke about, but, yeah, no, that's a structure fire. Yeah. It doesn't matter who it came from. It's reported that someone's house is on fire. Yeah. Wow, that's a weird one. Who calls their alarm company when their house is on fire? It's kind of like my grandma, when she has anything weird, she'll call me and I'll say, Grandma, I need you to hang up and dial 911 because I'm in Colorado and you're in Illinois and I can't help you. She fell and yeah, needs help up off the floor. Oh God, I know. So, yeah.
Kind of have my face paralyzed. The office open now?
Is 911 open? Yeah. Okay. These are good ones. I like this.
We have one the other day where a bicycle rider found on the side of the road,
Okay.
bike smashed up. He does not know what happened.
He himself, the injured.
Rider himself,
Sure. Blacked out. Okay.
so we were having a discussion about whether it's 30, but he fell off the bicycle,
Okay.
or 9, but they're on the side of the road and in front of they thought that
I think that's a huge assumption if we make 29, unless there is another vehicle there saying he doesn't remember, but I just hit him with my car. You know what I mean? But yeah, with a like a call taker in a split second going, what do I do with this? Do I have enough to take a full deviation if they went to 29? I don't think so. I don't think there's like a rule there that they've broken. I think that maybe it's just an education of, since we don't really know for sure, maybe 30 might fit a little bit better. Yeah. But again, I'd want to hear that one because yeah, that's an interesting call. I'd want to hear the recording to know exactly what happened. I saw a little chat come up, but I missed what it said. Or maybe it was mine. I don't know. Okay. Okay. All right. Do you guys want to see Aqua 8? Because we have like 2 minutes left. This is what the next Aqua will look like. Notice I have gone to an internet website to access this. Oh no, I've forgotten it. I was supposed to remember this for me. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. We'll see you next time. What the heck did I make my password?
I understand the opposite fee, if we, non-community will have, like, password, be able to log in and see what we do, because of such a lot, right? So a lot of people aren't, like,
I just did this.
what do they?
Yeah. Ooh, I think I got it. So when they log into Aqua to review their feedback, it will not use a license, of Aqua. Because it'll be a separate login. It'll be a dispatcher login instead of an auditor login or a reviewer login. So Aqua will not be, it's not cloud-based. It still requires an install. But it's web hosted. So that means that you don't have to have it, you don't have to be on the computer that you have it installed on to be able to access to do case reviews. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yep. Because we have lots of people that want that, right? And this is it, you guys. So, the look of it is totally different. We no longer will have case review folders anymore. Essentially, all of your work will just be kind of in this one place. And so, when you go to like your pending, oh, that's radio traffic, sorry, pending, then you'll import your cases in. So you'll have to, the first version of Aqua 8, you won't be able to import directly from the, alias anymore. You'll have to export the cases out of ProQA and then import them into Aqua 8 for this first version, I'm told, because they haven't connected that quite yet. But when you import those cases in, essentially it's going to open up and look like, wonder if I have some cases in here. I don't. It's going to look like that IPR, the incident performance report, and you're just marking right on it, the case itself. And then you can actually run reports from there. But there won't be any more having to like move things around and sort things and all of that stuff. Like there used to be with all the filters. You will also have an unlimited number of agency defined tags now. So if that's something that you're using a lot in Aqua 7, you have an unlimited number in Aqua 8 of agency defined tags. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool. So you've got all of your little buttons over here on this side. And then this is where you can see I've hit the button for reports. So if I wanted to run a specific report, I don't have any cases in here, so it's not going to do anything right now, but you can just see all of the different reports in one place, right? Or, if I wanted to go to, the different documents that are available, this is kind of my library of all the documents. That's the radio traffic. And then this is the import export. And then you have your ACE review calculator as well. So that's all still the same. Yeah, you're tagging them now. That'll be a tag. So you'll tag it to go to a different, essentially a folder to show up in a different folder. Yeah. Mhm. And it's under sorting.
Is that available then?
Not yet. The radio, so they're still working on the standards for radio. But it will, when it is released, it will only be available in Aqua 8. Yeah. Thank you. I realize we're over on time, so. But yeah, there's a look at and this is slotted to come out in May, hopefully, fingers crossed. But you won't be required to move to it. You'll have, I think, a full year. Usually when we release new versions, we give you a full year before we kill the previous versions. Aqua 7, I think, will probably be around for more than a year because it does require a SQL server. So, some agencies won't want that, so they'll stay on Aqua 7. But thanks, guys. Hopefully this was helpful and I will see you next time. Yeah, I hope so. What do we put it down for?
We're working on scheduling for
Yeah.
October 11th.
October 11th, yeah.
About doing a 4-hour.
Yep.
File that were made hybrid for folks who don't want to drive. but-
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we could be flexible, we could say 9 to 1, but.
Yeah, doesn't matter to me either, really.
But my colleague told Kelly to go to meeting next
Yes,
time.
we'll do that for sure. If that's better. I don't know if people prefer Zoom, but like I said, it tracks attendance and registration and all that, so we'll spin that up.
If folks have topics you want covered.
Yes.
Then send them to me and I'll
Yes.
make a list and we'll get shared at the next time.
Awesome.
Or-
Thanks. Yes.
With the interfacility transfer